Hello, I'm Virginia, and I've been sent this video, The Lost Boys, by a couple of people, and they were very eager to know my opinion. I am the author of Childhood Unlimited, and I work on my day life as a gender equality expert. So I go to schools, to companies and communities and festivals and try to bring this conversation and challenge some old ideas. I also write in Substack under Through My Lens, and I'll probably be posting these videos there. But I thought it was very interesting. There are a lot of things in this video that I highly agree with. There are things in these videos that I highly disagree with. And a lot of them are a matter of refining. So I'm a big believer in yes and. And there are a lot of examples in this podcast in which it's very difficult for me not to stop it and be like, well, yes, but, or and, how are we going to bring it back to the root of the problem? Because we cannot talk about masculinity if we are unable to name the root of the cause. Patriarchy is also hurting men, and we need to be able to hold the reality that privilege and struggle are living together under that same narrative. So that is what my specialty is, and I bring it back to the very beginning, the self-fulfilling prophecy of gender stereotypes and how every person is put in a box and none of us really fit in it. So be around and we're gonna dismantle some of those points and we're gonna get there. Hope you enjoy it.
I want to start out by making a statement, Richard, if you don't mind, and get you to react to it. I feel like things were more easily defined when we were growing up. Scott and I are contemporaries, both born around 1964, and I feel like we had some definition to our lives. You know, there were certain things that boys did, there were certain things that girls did, and again, I'm not trying to be overly parochial, or and I understand that we want to be accepting in our culture for varying lifestyles and so on and so forth. But, Scott said something to me that really penetrated a few months back. He said, there's no advocacy for white males. There's maybe 75 different affinity groups at NYU, but there's no white male affinity group. And not necessarily saying that there should be, sir, but I guess I'd like to ask you first for the statistic that Scott's giving. What happened in our sociology? What happened in our world, our culture, that's led to this problem that we're all facing?
Or I wrote back some of which Scott's referred to, but like in education and wages and employment. And that's my background, right? I'm a fact guy. I'm a researcher, policy guy. But I think there's something behind that, which is what you're both talking about, which is this identity question. So beneath the surface of facts, there's this question about identity. And I do think that there was a clearer script. That's the way I like to think about this, is that there was the old script was for women, wife and mother. You're going to raise the kids, you're going to, etc. And the old script for men was you're going to be the economic provider, head of household, breadwinner, right? That was the script my parents had. And I had a great upbringing, I'm very lucky, etc. But there wasn't like a question that they had to ask us about how they're going to divide it. And we tore those scripts up, I think, Anthony. I'll see how you both react to this. I think we tore them up and we said to women, your script is no longer housewife, mother. It's anything you want it to be. It's CEO, it's leader, it's you go girl, it's amazing. And as Scott said, that's arguably the biggest economic liberation in human history. Amazing. So the script that girls and young women get now is around autonomy, of independence, assertiveness. It's all uplift. It's incredibly empowering. We tore up the old script for men, which was breadwinner, head of household, etc. And we didn't replace it with anything. We just tore up the old script. And so what that means is a lot of men now feel that they're basically improvising. They basically don't have a script. Or if they do, it's a negative script. I really fear that one of the problems now is that the script around what men should be is more defined negatively. It's don't be toxic, don't mansplain. So there's a long list of don'ts now for men, most of which we would probably agree with. But what about the do's? What's the to-do list for a 24-year-old man now?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question because there's a lot I need to say. Well, first of all, I am glad that you have a happy upbringing growing up in a very traditional family. That's brilliant. I would love to talk to your mom as well and understand what else would she have liked to do. I mean, was she very happy in that narrative? Because whenever we've prioritized the well-being of everybody else, sometimes at the expense of mothers, then I don't know if the conversation is fair. But let's assume she was, because I think most women were not questioning that script the same way that we are still today living in that script. Whenever you say that the new script for women is that you can do absolutely everything, and that we've stripped it away, I need to clarify. Nobody, like society as such, did not tell women, hey, you go and do wherever you want. That's not what happened. Every single right, every single change of narrative that women have had through history, it's been fighting. It's been challenging thing. It's been with a lot of backlash. It's been with a lot of women pioneering it and receiving a lot of grief for challenging the status quo. And that's not something in the past. I mean, we're not in this narrative of just go get it. We are in a moment in which women are still praised for being mothers, for being in relationships. If you look at TV shows and media and films, if you read the books, if you see the marketing that we're given, but most importantly, if you go out and have conversations with people, women are still penalized whenever they go out of the script, or penalized for sticking to the scripts. We are told that the most important thing we have to do is be mothers and be selfless mothers, and then our careers hit a massive rock whenever we do. There's no support for parenting, and it still falls on the shoulders of women at the expense of their career. So I think talking about the women's script as if it's something from the past, it's very unfair. And talking about it as if society had just granted to them in a silver platter and said, sorry, our fault, we've been doing this wrong for so many years, you deserve now to do everything, it's also unfair. I want to also offer that this conversation within Feminist has always been about men can also do everything. Men can also be nurses and teachers and co-responsible parents. In fact, please be co-responsible parents. Please be teachers and more caring and more empathetic and establish more connections and relationships. This is also the fight of feminism, and it's one that men are gonna have to lead as well. I think we women have been asking for that and have been referring to that need, but we were also very busy trying to change our own narrative and script. So very pleased to see podcasts like this in which men are gonna try to retweak and put other things in value for manhood. And again, there will be some backlash because sadly, traditions and status quo, there's always the fear of challenging it. But yeah, the script for men, it's also be everything. Never the script of women had been at the expense of men. It has been about hoping that men will understand and get on board with the change of society. So, yep.
But Scott, what Richard is saying happened for what reason? Through osmosis? There was a backlash to masculinity or male toxic masculinity. What caused this to happen, or did it just happen naturally? Or
well, and I'm going to do like a rich little version of Richard here, and he can correct me where I got it wrong and where I got it right. But the right will claim that it was, if you tell men that they're idiots and predators for 4 or 5 decades, they start to believe you. I think that's part of it, but I would argue that it's much more nuanced in that the primary.
Sorry, before we go any further, have we been telling men for 40 or 50 years that they're useless and predators? Because I think we're still telling men, specifically white men, today, that they're better. I mean, if you just go now and Google successful leaders, or if you say ChatGPT, show me an image of successful person or leadership or thing, it's still giving you white men. If you look at the landscape of the people that own the power in society, they are still men, specifically white men. There's even a thing today called the dream gap, in which by the age 6 or 7, girls start thinking that, there's some dreams that are unavailable for them because maybe boys are smarter and are better. So they will do experiments, and whenever they tell them to imagine astronauts or mathematicians, they said that those are roles for boys because they require people to be very, very intelligent. So I don't think it's true that we are saying to men that they're worse, that they're predators. And actually, even whenever you mention something, even today, 2025, you have to always clarify, not all men. Every time we say something good about men, as for everybody, every time you say something slightly problematic about men, you have to caveat, not all men, because still manhood and masculinity is extremely protected in our society. So I'm not saying we don't have to protect men. I'm just saying that if we're going to tell the story, we need to tell a story that it's factual. We need to understand that the media and the books and the show and the life around us still holds men in a very different and protected category. But go on.
Are much harder to solve and less political. The on ramps into a middle class where, for someone who wasn't cut out for college or education, a lot of those on ramps have been taken away. Simply put, we've outsourced a lot of our manufacturing jobs. 1/3 of jobs used to require a college degree. Now it's 2/3. What happened to wood shop, metal shop, auto shop? There is a bias now that we've leveled the playing field in education in my industry. Women have just blown by men. The attributes to be a good student just come more easily to a woman than at NYU. We don't like to talk, we don't say this out loud. There are certain graduate schools at NYU where if we were admissions blind, they not only would be 70% women, they'd be 70% Asian women.
And is that natural? Because I think we can have this conversation. Let's have this conversation, but we need to remember that this is socialized. This is a construct. The attributes that make women excel in these education systems are not naturally coming from them. They are socialized, and it's something that we create and that we enhance through the moment they're born. So women are more likely to be people pleasers. They are more they're asked more to follow rules. They are more expected to be sit down, playing to games and doing things that require less physical mobility. They're less encouraged to do sports or to be competitive. So a lot of the toys, the language, or the role models that they see around them equips them or enhance the kind of skills that then happen to do better in the education system. An education system that, by the way, we should challenge in the first place because it is extremely outdated and it's no longer fit for purpose for the society that we want to create. We are moving towards a society in which what we need is critical thinking, creativity, capacity to discuss and socialize, and we are still having an education system that is underfunded and have the ratio of adults per children, it's very small, which makes that in order for the classes to be manageable, kids need to require to be, steady, everybody following the same rhythm and follow orders. And again, I understand why we are here. I don't think this system works for anyone. And yeah, also women do better because they've been asked and repeated that, education is key. Women have been told so many times that education is key for their independence because until very recently, if you did not have an education as a woman, you were you were more easily in the hands of, okay, I have to marry and then I depend on my partner, and that gives me very little independence. So education was the fast way for women, or the most secure way for women to access a better future. And those behind us that did not have that access, that were not as lucky as us, and I'm not talking about generations ago, like my parents in Spain, the subjects that my mom was encouraged to take were about being a domestic, being a good wife as well. They were not with the idea of gonna be like a high degree. So obviously by the time my mom had us, she was very determined that we were not having the limitations that she had. So the way that she focused on motivating us for going to university and just keep going and study and don't be dependent were based on her own livings and her own experiences of how being a woman had limited her in the past. So yes, I agree that at the moment women are doing better. I mean, that's just data. But how are we going to approach it in a way that A, we understand that the system could do better, but B, that those skills that are making women be better are also maybe not the ones that make them be better paid once they leave the higher education, because we know that even if we have better degrees or more educations, we still have less money for the same jobs, and we are encountering glass ceilings and more difficulties to progress and all of those kind of things. So how do we hold both truths at the same time, and how we find a solution that works for everybody? And again, motivation and aptitude might be key here. I mean, an aptitude more so than aptitude or natural skills.
And so there's just the natural attributes of a woman lend themselves better to education. I also think economically, we've passed a lot of legislation that has transferred money from young people to old people. People over the age of 70 are 72% wealthier than they were 40 years ago. People under the age of 40 are 24% less wealthy. Well, that affects men and women. Yes, but when men don't have money, quite frankly, they're just less attractive. That is more of a hit to them than it is a hit to women. So,
okay, Scott, we need what I mean, what, like, I just cannot believe that we can have the idea or say that being poor is worse for men than it is for women. Women are still most of the poverty people in the world. If you decided to focus only in laws that support poverty, which please, I'm here for it, you will be supporting more women than men. And not only that, but it is also demonstrated that women end up having more caring responsibilities. So they are the ones that even in poverty end up, and a lot of the poverty is caused by their caring responsibilities for elder people or for their own kids. A lot of single parentings are obviously mothers. And the difficulty for women to leave poverty are higher, and they also end up in traps like sexual trafficking and a lot of really scary and gender-based and sex-based problematics. So no, I cannot say that it's worse for men to be poor because they're less attractive. I think if I had to give you that as a fact, if I had to say, okay, yes, that's true, we will have to agree that that's only because women had not access to wealth until extremely recently, which made women having to focus on suitable men with money in order to have a certain life quality that they could not attain themselves. They could not achieve the lifestyle that they wanted themselves with their own skills and practices because they depended on men. Because until relatively recently, women could not have access to mortgages, women could not have access to credit cards, women could not have assets of any sort. And of course, if there were certain things and there was the comfort of the status, especially whenever you're an underprivileged group like womanhood, then being a rich woman makes massive difference from being a poor woman. So if they wanted to have access to that privilege of class and of money, it had only be through the people they were mating or they were pairing with. So yeah, that's what money and manhood were attracted. But again, that's not because if we go back to that idea, I find very difficult that we don't see that women were still the victim in that case. So yeah, I don't think we can agree that that poverty is worse for men. I think that poverty is really bad for everyone, and that yes, we need to focus on poverty as our main cause, because that's the one that will help those that need it the most. But yeah, no, I don't think the attractiveness thing is a thing.
You have an education system that's biased against them. You have, Richard can speak to the actual biological reasons, prefrontal cortex, societal, economic. I think those are the primary culprits. I think it's a little bit, and Richard, I'm curious to get your opinion. I think it's a little bit lazy to say that it's people not respecting men. I think that's part of it, but I think it's a more complicated, there's a bunch of dimensions here that are probably bigger contributors to the fall of young men. But I'm open to
It's very
pushback.
funny because this is an advert about t-shirts, and at some point he says that his wife is very happy because she doesn't have to pack him 10 t-shirts anymore. She can only pack him one, which I think it's extremely funny in the context of this podcast, because why does your wife still pack your suitcase whenever you're a grown adult? I mean, obviously you do you in your family, but the way he says that as if it's the done thing and everybody understand that, it's maybe part of the problem. Maybe that's part of the problem of the Lost Boys. Maybe the way we still are not co-responsible in the house, and we take for granted that our partners do things for us and they take care for us, in those ways are maybe part of the conversation that we need to have. So I thought it was very funny that I introduced that here. Let me see if I find it.
My criticisms of more progressive leaning people is that they can't accept that men have problems because they're still convinced that men are the problem.
This is really interesting because I think a lot of the conversations that happen around masculinity, people translate them as men. I mean, of course, men have problems. And a lot of the problems are individual problems, and a lot of the problems that men have as a group are because of masculinity. Whenever we talk about toxic masculinity, we're not talking about men are toxic. We're talking about the narrative of masculinity that shapes and form and the script, as you were saying before, of men is toxic. It's toxic for women, it's toxic for society, and it's toxic a lot, mostly for men. So I think that is where the confusion is. I mean, I don't think people are saying men are the problem. I think what progressive people are saying is a lot of the problems that you're talking about are problems with masculinity. And if you want to fix the problems, you're going to have to change the narrative about masculinity. Because the problem of men had a difference with a lot of the problems with other categories, and you will say something later and like, oh yeah, we cannot say that about Black people or women. There are systemic problems. There are problems that happen. The barriers that they're having are barriers that are legal. Women, for example, that still don't have full control of their bodies in a lot of places in the world. There are difference of real access to education. So women, again, in a lot of part of the world, still don't go to the schools. There are problems that refer, so there are problems that are systemic. There are problems that are sometimes legal or sometimes that directly affect to their opportunities, to their direct opportunities. When we're talking about the problems with men, it's a lot of it, in my opinion, is the self-fulfilling prophecy and the limits and the boundaries and the expectations and the narrow, awful box that men are squeezed in, and it's wrong. So it is fair for me to say that it is men's responsibility to challenge and to get rid of that script. They have to say the same way that women have said, look, a lot of the script that you have given us, it doesn't suit. And we have, oh my God, like it's been an endless fight. It's still happening today. We still have conversations within feminists and outside feminists about what is being a woman, what is our role, where do we belong, what do I want to do, what is the backlash, how do I have to look like. There's so many conversations happening around womanhood and about challenging the laws and protesting and being pioneer. Men need to be doing that work, and it's not going to be easy, but again, it wasn't easier for anybody. So yeah, men do not have, of course, men have problems, but are men willing to unpack their masculinity? Because there are going to be prices. And especially in this context, they're going to have to let go of certain narratives. And I understand that for women, it was relatively easy because it was an upgrade. It was that, we could be tempted to do things that were reserved only for men. And it was feeling like, okay, you were breaking molds. While for men, it's very difficult to say, maybe the solution of a lot of my problems consist in be more like a woman in a lot of things, praise or reclaim things for men that have been solely reserved and for women. So connection, communication, domestic responsibility, all of those kind of things are there to grab, and men have to do that job. So one thing is to say that men is the problem, which again I don't think many people are saying, and another thing is to say men are responsible to unpack and to challenge and to morph that masculinity that they are being raised in.
And that's created a blindness to the reality of these problems of men, or a tendency sometimes to say if men are struggling, it must be their fault. So if men are committing suicide or having mental health problems, that's because they won't get help. If men are dying of COVID, it's...
Well, men are not getting help because men are not equipped to ask for help. Because men, from the moment they're born, they're asked to be a stoic, because the role models they're given, because the language is around them, because everything that shapes their idea of masculinity, it's against the idea of asking for help. Men struggle to form those vulnerable and strong connections with other people, which are key for asking for help. I mean, not being able to say that you're having health problems, that you feel anxiety, that you are struggling with money, all of those kind of things. It's not natural. Men are not naturally like that. And I say that as a person that had a baby boy and is raising it, and all of my book and all my study shows where all these, whenever we unpack it, whenever we start looking at the books and the shows and the clothes and the language and the everything around them is telling them very clear what is being a man. And stoicism is one of those things that belong. Men should not ask for help. Men have to just man up and suck it up, and they have to, just save the day. And all of those narratives, all of those ideas are what make men not to ask for help. So I don't think it's men's fault not ask for help. It's not as simple as that. But it is masculinity's fault that men are not asking for help. And it's men's responsibility to challenge that idea of masculinity, to role model a different type of masculinity, to critically think, to look at it on the face and say, like, look, this is not serving us. This is not good enough. We need to reject the idea that we have to be super strong all of the time and bottle things up. This is obviously bad for us. So again, fault and responsibility are not the same thing. And this is how we need to be very nuanced in this conversation.
It's because they wouldn't get the vaccine. If men are not doing well in school, it's because they can't be bothered to crack a book, etc. And so there's this weird sort of blame thing that happens with men, but only men now, rather than saying, well, maybe the education system's not working very well for men. Maybe the workplace has changed. And so I think you're right, Scott, that these are deeper challenges. But I also think you're right, Anthony, that it does make things worse if we actually then not only say men aren't having problems, but also point to them as the problem. So it's a really unfortunate set of circumstances. The reason men are struggling is not because people are being mean to them, but that doesn't mean people being mean to them doesn't make things worse. And I certainly think it makes them open to much more reactionary voices who can then credibly claim that mainstream institutions and people don't care about them because they're too busy pathologizing them. And I do think if you want someone to really kind of feel threatened and alone, then threaten their identity. I think we do know that, and masculinity has become part of that problem.
But to Anthony, to your point around misandry, you never hear the word. You hear misogyny all the time. You never hear misandry.
Do you know why you don't hear misandry? Because there's not a systemic problem. That's not a real problem. I mean, I wrote about it. I would love to send that to you. Whenever women said, I hate men, what is the, I mean, whenever women say I hate men, they're still, bringing them to school and doing the pickup, and then carrying a lot of the mental load and the emotional load in their family. I know women that say I hate men, and I don't know any woman that hate men that will want for men what we have. I don't know any woman that will expect for men the rate of sexual assault that we women have. I would not want any woman, the woman that says, oh, I hate men, that will want for men the domestic abuse that we have. Women are killed every week, every day around the world by men. Women are raped by men every day. Women are sexually assaulted in their workplaces. They are expected to do unpaid work in their house, in the schools, in their offices every single day. Men don't say I hate women, but one could think that they do. But women say I hate men as a way to respond in a world that it's still unfair. Oh my God, I hate men. The other day, my neighbor, she's 14 years old, she was telling me about a man that was kind of harassing her in the train. And yeah, I thought, fuck, I hate men. But still, I don't hate men in a way that men hate us. I hate men in a way like, oh, for fuck's sake, I hate the way that a lot of the constructions of masculinity led men to believe that this is okay. And again, because of the tone of the program, I shall say, not all men.
I went on Theo Vaughn and I was talking about struggling young men, and I get what I always get. Dozens, if not hundreds, of comments along the lines of, well, if young men just got their act together. Now, imagine me saying that about the Black community. Well, if Black people just got their act together, what would be the response?
But do we understand that racism is systemic, right? We understand that the history and the reality of Black people in America is very different from the reality of white young men in America. I mean, parents today, Black parents today, still have to tell their kids to be careful with the police because they can get killed. I mean, those are systemic, real problems. I mean, we still have, especially in America, like the insane amount of racism in America, it is compared to the discrimination, which I'm not saying, again, we can say that men are struggling without saying that there is systemic barriers that facilitate or that are responsible of a lot of that problems. So we can understand that there are social issues that make men and masculinity toxic for them and are responsible of a lot of very real and very problematic struggles without having to compare it with problematics that are based in the law, that are based in the organizations, in the DNA of an oppressive system. So yeah, I think if you'd say in a conference that Black people have to get their shit together, it would be fairly so very badly received. That is not okay to say. And I'm not saying that we should not hold more nuance for men and for masculinity and say, look, we need to go deeper to the problem and just not say that. But again, I don't think we can compare. I don't think comparing it is fair.
Well, if women were just in touch with their emotions, I mean, it is open season on it. If you're at a conference and you say, well, women are better managers, they're more thoughtful, they're more nuanced, they make better doctors, they're more nurturing, everyone just kind of claps politely and nods their head. If I were to say men are more risk aggressive and on average make better entrepreneurs, what would the response be?
It doesn't matter what the response would be, because you know what? Men still get 98%, like women get 2% of VC money. I mean, society constantly tell women that they're not good entrepreneurs. I mean, like, the people vote with their money. People act, I mean, actions are way louder than any words. So VCs are constantly telling, there's loads of data, not only about the money itself. I mean, we're talking about less than 2% of the money from VCs goes to women entrepreneurs, like founding teams. We're talking about the questions that VC asks or the scrutiny that women entrepreneurs get to and all of those kind of things. So Yeah, the same way that we talk about is open season. It's open season to insult men. Well, have we look our power people? Who do we have in the power? Who do we still get in the media? Whose books are being read more? Whose films get more money to be made of? Actions are way louder, and I understand that it must be unnerving to hear, especially because men are less used to hear things against them. So it feels very actually, Richard was saying before, anything that attacks your identity becomes really personal. And men, for the first time, are hearing things that felt personal to them, or they're having to share the pie, and that does not always feel fair. But let's look at the numbers and the data. The world is telling very loudly to men that they're still the most important people, in the way we showcase them in the media, in the ways their voices are still the more heard, in the way they have more access to the power, in the way there are 9 women in the FTSE 100, the CEOs of the FTSE 100, and they are 91 men. I mean, we are telling men they're better. We are showing them, we are giving them different opportunities and then give them different access to power than we are to women. So no, I don't think it's open season. I don't.
So it feels like we can't even have an open, honest conversation because it's open season on one gender and the other from just even if you're trying to have a science-based conversation, it's a third rail. You can't say anything that might imply that women are, might be contributing, or the role women play, that this might be part of the, they might be part of not only the solution, but also part of the problem. You can't.
Of course, women are part of the solution because, again, the problem is the patriarchy, and women are part of the patriarchy. Women are active players on it because we have a lot of, and when women have a lot of internalized misogyny, we are all part of this society. We are all the self-fulfilled prophecy of a lot of gender stereotypes. We are all growing up in the stories that told us that, there's a right way to do things, and the mother and the father and the white fence and the 2 kids and the mother that, prepare delicious, healthy snacks, and the man that earns a lot of money. We're all part of this. Women are upholders of the patriarchy. They are also the ones that suffer more because of the patriarchy, but they also uphold them a lot of the times against themselves, and definitely as well as part of maintaining or reinforcing the masculinity. But just because women are part of the patriarchy doesn't mean that patriarchy itself and that narrative and that the structure and that system is not the one hurting both men and women.
Can't even go there.
It's really interesting, Scott. If you look, there is some really interesting research where if you show people evidence on sex differences, if you say there are some on average differences,
that there's an undercurrent of this lack of advocacy for men. They can't advocate for themselves. And the other thing is they can't express that they feel the way that you guys are suggesting, meaning you can't have a 15-year-old say, Professor Galloway, I feel left out of the equation, or I feel one way, but if I assert myself and say X, Y, Z, I'm not heard, or people come down on me like a ton of bricks. I guess where I'm getting to is a lot of these guys, my children included, they'll find recluse in the internet. They'll go on.
Before, and we're going to agree about internet, but before we go there, I have sympathy for that. I do think that, and I think it's our fault as parents and as society. I think if by the age of a kid that is 15, we have not explained to them their privilege properly, I think they are gonna inevitably, because that's humanity, and if you're used to privilege, then equality can feel a little bit oppressive. So if you're 15 years old, if you have not teach them by the time they're 15 how men are benefiting from this society as well, and how this system it's also hurting them, and if they're not equipped to critically think, then of course they're gonna feel pushed behind. Whenever my son was 4 or 5, yeah, around that, because I was writing the book and I was telling him what I do, and I said somebody had been angry with me because, you know, feminists get a lot of backlash, and we were talking about it, and I was saying, like, look, Eric, if every boy in your class has let's say 6 candies and every girl in your class has 3, and he was like, yeah, that's not very fair. And I was like, I know it's not very fair. Well, what feminists are trying to do is get everybody to 10. We think that 6 is not good enough. We think that 3 is definitely not good enough. And we want everybody to have 10 candy. So what feminists do is they go and then they give 7 candy to the girls and they give 4 candy to the men. And then the men get really angry because they're like, I only got 4 candy. Why is it that they have 7? And then my son looked at me and he's like, yeah, but they already had 6. And I was like, exactly. So I think that my 5-year-old could understand that. So I think if boys only see that women are getting 7 candy and they are only getting 4, they can get very angry and they can say that that's not fair. And I think that the part that we're failing to is to show them that they already have 6. That's the part that we, our society, are failing to tell men, look, we want you to get to 10. We are taking you arriving to 10 extremely seriously. You deserve 10 candy, but you have 6. And they also deserve 10 candy, but they have 3. So have you, whenever your son at 15 tells you like, it's not fair that, you know, they're not talking about me, have you sit down with them and look at their curriculum and be like, okay, let's see the people that you're studying in your books. Let's go and have a look. Oh yeah, this is a man, this is a man. What do you say, Miss Fallon? Whenever we see lists of like, okay, let's go and see the list of the 10 best paid people. What do you see in this list? What calls your attention? Whenever you see the list of, let's say again, politicians or something like that, have you sit with them and be like, here it's again? Because that's an exercise that we can do from the very beginning. Like whenever you look something and you see sexist in a show, stop the show and be like, isn't it weird? Like, what are you noticing here? Whenever you look at the list of the best, all those kind of things, there's plenty of data. There's no shortage of data. Have we showed them that data? Have we told them, look, this is what happened? I told my kids that until, you know, this is how women got to vote. Women couldn't vote until very recently. How is that, you know, or women had to get married, or women could not have things. Have we told them the story and the reality of women and men and the different situations and the pros and the cons and the struggles of everybody, but without, you know, not in a blaming way. Obviously, it's not their fault that women could not vote, but have we make them part of like, how is this not super important? Like, what do you think about it? And so this is the problem. We're not telling boys that they already start by the way they're born. They are already, because of historical background, because access to the media, because the people and the male gaze in the people that are doing the laws, because the people that has the money that funds the next entrepreneurs, because all of those things, because the role models that they have, because the people that we study in our curriculum, we are not telling boys that they are already starting this competition. It's not a competition with 6 candy. So we are moving forward. We're moving to a world in which we want everybody to have better, and they need to feel part of that. They need to feel like, okay, there's something winning for me, but also there's a responsibility for me to acknowledge that sometimes we need to give a fair leg to the other ones that came with less systemic opportunities.
On the internet, they fall prey to some conspiracy theories. Some of these guys think the moon landing didn't happen. I've got to listen to all this sort of nonsense that goes on the internet. And I feel like they're falling into a trap of despair without the tools necessary to stand up for themselves. Do I have that wrong? And if I do, tell me what I have wrong. And if I have it right, is there a solution?
Richard?
Yeah, so I think you have it right, that the question of what am I supposed to do today as a man? Right? How am I supposed to date? What about money? What about sex? What about fitness? all those questions, like what's the script, what's the story, how am I supposed to be today? That question is on the lips and the minds of almost all young men today. So the question is not, is there a question? It's who's providing answers. And you're right that if they're not getting answers in the classroom, from their fathers, from their scout groups, from their churches, from wherever, and they don't have that conversation, those role models, of course they'll go and look online. And so the solution is to have this kind of conversation, is for us to be having the conversation, to be having a good faith conversation about advocating for our boys and men. I mean, Scott already...
Of course, we need everybody. Again, everybody's asking, who am I supposed to be? I mean, we are all asking ourselves these questions, and voice angers, and everyone it's going through internet, and they're watching films and series that gives them very clear understanding of what being a boy is and what a girl is. We have internet and influencers and who's making money and who are we listening, and media companies that push algorithms that are really, really scary. So yeah, I completely agree with you. We need to have these conversations from the house. We need to have these conversations in the schools. Whenever I try to go to schools and help having this conversation, there is very rarely money to do any of these. There is very rarely a priority, like it's all about this is what we're going to do in the school. It's very academic, but we need to have this conversation. We need to have teachers that are equipped to have these conversations. Whenever they spot misogyny in the school, they need to be able to talk about it. They need to be equipped with information and with resources and with tools to hold a space, to have honest information and to challenge them. Kids, boys, but everyone needs to be teach to critically think and need to have containers in which they can have all these questions and all these that's not fair, all these very natural and very part of teenager years, and this want to conform, and this what is the social penalty, and understanding how they think. And they need to be adults that are equipped, that are understanding, that are curious, that are compassionate, that know how to listen, and then mostly know how to challenge back some of those ideas and theories. So yeah, we need to present boys with better role models. We need to start praising publicly and loudly men that are doing things in a way that is much more healthy for everyone. We need to stop applauding and only giving TV screen time to people that have succeeded by outdated, narrow ways to do things. And men need to be showing up vulnerable for their kids. They need to be having those conversations, uncomfortable conversations, because part of this conversation, it's going to have to be inevitably around privilege, and that is uncomfortable. The same way that we have to talk to women about eating disorders and the way they look and the way their self-esteem is absolutely in bits from very, very early stages, because they've been asked to look in a way. They've been told that the way they look is the most important asset of their life, and they're giving them ways to look that are completely unreal. I mean, porn is making both men and women extremely miserable. And if you talk with teenager women, I mean, it is breathtaking what they're going through and the way they're expecting to look like filter versions of themselves. 14 years old expected to look like 23 years old women that have gone already through surgery, Botox at very early at 20. So yeah, we need to have the conversation about like how this is not real, how we're all much more wholesome, how we are much more unique. And yeah, it's on all of us, because if we don't do that, if we're not very intentional about equipping the kid, if we are not creating those spaces and creating those containers, they're going to find somebody that does it and tell them what they want to hear for money, or something that it's going to use the fertile soil that is the lack of self-esteem in those very formative years to put absolutely awful ideas.
Already mentioned the suicide statistics, but just to put a sharp point, we lose 40,000 men a year to suicide now. And since 2010, almost all of the rise has been among young men. So the rise in suicide among men under the age of 30 has been 30% just since 2010. We have a crisis of loss of male lives in this. And if we can, and by the way, it's higher among white men. There are lots of other issues that go the other way. But if we can't have that conversation honestly and openly and tackle it, someone else is going to have that conversation.
We need to have this conversation. I talk about this in every single talk that I do as gender equality. We need to talk about the way patriarchy is hurting men. We need to talk about how we need men to be more sensitive, and we need to give them emotional language. We need to talk to men about how it's okay not to be okay. We need to tell men that we need to show them that masculinity is not as narrow and as hurtful as patriarchy and this society tells them to. That they don't need to be the breadwinner and the head of household. You were saying before that the script was very easy before. You were the breadwinner and the household. We need to tell them that that's gone. We need to tell them that everybody, every human needs to be wholesome first, need to be able to be connected, need to be able to critically think, need to be able to hold each other, to see part of the community. We need to let go of the old script and narratives. That is the key. If we want to solve the problem and we are in a crisis and we are losing men, we need to stop thinking that it was before better when it was a script, it was all wonderful, because the script is gone. And the problem is the society has moved on, thankfully, to a better place. And the men that are still holding on into ways to be or ways to behave that are still based on a society that no longer exists are not finding the right tools to navigate this one. So we need to help them, and maybe it starts by being honest about how some of the things that were part of that narrative are not helpful anymore.
The question is not, are we having this conversation? The question is, who's having it?
Their wife, who no longer sees them as a provider, is less attracted to them and divorces them. 70% of divorce filings are from women. And we all like to pretend that all women are Lisa Simpson or Marge and high character people. I can prove statistically there's a lot of good women, some not so good women. There's a lot of good men, some not so good men. And then the man loses his wife, his primary relationship. He oftentimes loses access to his kids. I'm going through this with a lot of my friends right now. They have teenage girls or kids and they get divorced. And quite frankly, the kids want nothing to do with them. It's like dad shows up, he doesn't live here. He's not part of my ecosystem. And all of a sudden the dad goes from having all this great kind of what I call garbage time, hanging out with his kids, and he's no longer in the same house. Family court is sometimes biased against men. And then he just has no role, no purpose, and he makes a conscious decision to check out. And that to me was just the most devastating, that it's a quote unquote rational decision. And what Richard was saying about the conversation, I think it's gotten remarkably more productive in large part because of some of Richard's work and research. But American households, millions of them, felt this and saw it happening for the last 2 decades, and no one was talking about it. And unfortunately, that void.
Okay, that's a lot to cover there. So yeah, the social construct at the moment, again, in those very traditional families in which the man takes the role of being the provider and the woman takes the role of being the homemaker, I think it's called. So if we've decided as a couple, and again, do decisions freely happening in a society with such patriarchal structures, but if for whatever reasons, and one of the reasons might be that you make more money and you have better access to certain kinds of things, kinds of jobs, and more access to wealth, you are being the provider, and then I am the one that sacrificed my career in order to take care of the house and being the main carer, and with the huge sacrifices that they make it. I mean, as a mother myself, and I did not stop working, but it is exhausting to be the main carer. I've missed myself so much during those years that they require a lot of attention. So the consequences, including physical, a lot of my friends' physical consequences of having kids are of course huge. So whenever women carry that burden, some of them it's inevitable, some of them it is very inevitable, and then the family falls apart. Of course, the court cases are gonna normally side by the mother, which is the one that already has that deeper relationship with the kids and have that and has already paid the penalty for having it. I don't know a lot of men that fight for shared custody. I know in Spain shared custody is the preferred option for the judges, and if possible that's the one that they give. But again, it's not always possible, because a lot of the times men have, whenever they're very traditional roles, women don't have the financial capacity to just go on their own, so they still require, or they expect, or they're needed in order to give the certain quality of life to the kids, to rely on the money that they committed as a family, that they were going to divide the roles that way. And men don't have the capacity in terms of timing or in terms of ability to provide the level of care because they're completely unused to it. So a lot of the family courts, what they do, it's trying to focus on the well-being of the children, and the well-being of the children, sadly, in this society, which I am not advocating for, still relies on staying with the mother. I will very much love a society in which everybody is co-responsible, everybody is equally caring of those children from the beginning, and both careers are equally supported and equally defended, and everybody raised at their own speed. There are more divorces now started by women because women have now financial capacity to divorce their partners. So if I no longer see that I'm happy with you and I am not stuck in this relationship with you, because I could not, I mean, a lot of women could not physically and could not live financially their marriages because they had no means. So if I no longer trap in this marriage and I have the decision to leave, then I am gonna leave. Because you mentioned the statistics about how it affects men, but it's also proven that divorced women are they're like a happy group. They normally have built better connections around them. They're still in touch with friends and families. They start going to therapy, and they overcome things that men, again, because of the ways they've been raised, they don't feel like they can, they don't feel like they have these connections. They've lost a lot of track because they've been focused very much on their career and progress and status from a certain ways. The relationships that men are taught to have are very normally shallow, around sports more than talking, competitive, so spending time together, amazing for networking, but lacks depth in terms of friendship. Again, none of this is natural. All of this is socially, and it's constructed, which is very hopeful because it means that we can change it. We can decide like this is not good enough for anybody. We're going to change it. But of course, also the kids. The kids are expected to always love unconditional, but if your father has not been present in your life and has had other priorities, and then why are kids expected to just keep choosing them and loving them, and like you come every 2 weekends and I'm expected to see you as an equal, as my mother who's been the one taking full care of me? I mean, I'm pretty sure that mother would have loved during all that time for the father to be equally responsible, for her to have time off, for help to have to just lower the mental load and the emotional load. How are they doing? Are they doing this? There were statistics about asking men in the street the name of the teachers of their kids, fathers, or the name of their best friends, and it's embarrassing. I mean, a lot of the fathers don't know the best friend of their kids. They don't know the name of the teacher. They don't know the last time the kids went to the doctor. Ask mothers. and they'll know. So whenever we say that the court system is biased or the society is biased, we've put women in that position, which is not so perfect if you have to do it alone. We've got men out of there, and then we want men some of the positive consequences. Well, you have to do the work. You have to want to be involved. That is one of the biggest fight of feminists. Men need to be wanting and celebrated. Well, and when I say celebrated, I'm not saying as in, yay, bare minimum. I'm saying like we need to see role models, and we need to praise men the same way that we praise women whenever they're good parents and they're present parents. And I generally, considering the amount of extreme praise that fathers get whenever they do the bare minimum, I think I don't know what else we can do. I mean, a man changes a nappy and he gets literally a parade. So maybe what we need to do is, just expect and demand and role model and showcase and talk about it and parent and all of those kind of things, so men feel involved. Because and teach them how to have better relationships, how to have friendships that are deeper, and that you can take your mask off and say, I'm struggling. It does not constantly need to be a game of stoicism and I'm doing well and I'm rational and everything is going and go. It needs to be about like this is hard, and finding people like you that are also struggling.
Into that void slipped some unproductive voices that said, be proud of yourself. And the problem with these unproductive voices is it starts positive. Be fit, be action oriented, take control, go up and approach a woman. And then it comes off the rails. Then it's like, now invest in crypto and that, don't let that bitch go to the club with her friends, put your foot down. It turns into thinly veiled misogyny. And so right away, the dialogue got a really bad rap. And the moment, and I imagine you experienced this, Richard, I know I did, when I just even started mildly advocating for men or talking about these problems, they're like, oh, you're one of those guys. You're one of those misogynists, and people just shut off. And the good news is, I think the conversation has got a lot more productive because the people now driving this conversation or the afterburners are mothers. We're like, guys, I am not political. I have 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 girl, 2 girls, 1 boy. The girl's in PR, one's in Carnegie Mellon, and my son is in the basement playing video games and vaping. So I think the evolution of this conversation has gotten a lot better. But be clear, that void got filled by some very unproductive voices that have kind of delayed a productive conversation.
This is how.
Feeling unneeded, not useful to the tribe or to the family is literally fatal. And so we both mentioned that there's a 4 times higher suicide rate among men of all ages than women, but among divorced men and women, it's 8 times higher. Because it shoots up for men, but not so for women, for exactly the reasons that Scott's talked about, which is you don't have these connections, you don't have these ties and these tethers. And I think the conversation's moved on a little bit as well, but it's taken a while. And the problem is that for too long, people like Scott were breaking the ice around this, was people said, in order to advocate for men, you have to somehow go against women. Our institute's published a piece on zero-sum thinking. In other words, the idea that for one group to do better, another group has to do worse. And zero-sum thinking is the enemy of a flourishing family, a flourishing community. But
not only that, like women are only going to be able to achieve their full potential whenever men achieve their full potential, because whenever we stop categorizing and putting people in boxes and this is what men do and this is what women do and this is how you have to relate each other within this rule, whenever we prioritize the uniqueness and the humanity and the wholeness of everyone, whenever we give access to everybody, to the all of the capacities and all of the possibilities and all of the roles and the good and the bad of everything, then it's the only way we're going to win. We're not gonna dismantle the patriarchy unless we dismantle it for everyone. So 100%, every woman that I know, every feminist that I know that are understanding the topic of gender equality, nobody wants to do it at the expense of men. That's not a thing. The only people that are thinking that, to be honest, are men. The only people that are seeing women's progress as a threat to their own progress are men. Women have never done that at the expense of men. Women have never built a narrative of like, it's our time. Women don't even want revenge. We're not saying, okay, it's our time, you sleep there, now you take it. Like, absolutely not. Women want co-responsible partners. Women, you were talking about the divorce cases, they do not divorce their partners when they're equal. They respond, they're man-child people that I have to take care of, because if I have to, be in charge of all of your chores, if I'm still going to be doing more chores and I'm still going to have to do all of the things and still being a provider and do all the kids, like, I'm so sorry, I don't have time or energy to take care for you, because society, I don't have to anymore. So the only way we're gonna win, all of us, is by moving forward. But feminists are not the ones that are saying, this is a problem, we have to do this against of you. But men are seeing the race of women and the change of narrative and the change of a script and the dissolution of those old structures as a threat to them. They are the one that are saying, okay, I'm losing out a lot, instead of seeing this an opportunity to say like, oh, I have lots to win. This is the opportunity for us to just tap into an uncharted and a much more fulfilling territory.
But we have been trapped in zero sum around this, which is that somehow to advocate for men, care about men, means to care less about women, which is like saying to a parent, you're only allowed to care about your son or your daughter. Like, which one are you going to choose? It's batshit crazy. But it is the way that the gender debate has played out on both sides, because you now get reactionaries saying, in order for men to do better, we need women to go back. We need to go back to the 1950s, women back in the home. And that's only true of the reactionary fringes. But unless we get to this idea that we have to rise together, which is what mums want, Scott's right, then we'll continue to have this vacuum that other voices can fill.
So Richard, do you think it's possible to insert this more broadly into the educational system, whether it's here in the United States or in the UK, or more broadly the Western liberal democracies? Is there something that we could insert in the curriculum that you could get buy-in from teachers' unions, women, progressives, that provide some more awareness? Like, listen, I know when I was in elementary school, they told me not to smoke. Some of us listened and some of us did the very opposite. But just the awareness of the health issue probably slowed people down.
Yeah, well, I think the tide is turning a little bit on this. What some of the ideas that I've had is to actually give parents the choice to start their boys in school a year later, or at least a few months later, because they do mature a bit later on average. So just having that option would be good in public schools as well as private schools, where a lot of them do it. Scott and I have both talked a lot about the need for more apprenticeships. Technical high schools are amazing for boys, just a bit more applied, a bit more hands-on. Boys, when they're learning, need to know the why and the who before they care about the what. So
I would love to suggest and put my name on the hat. I think I go to schools, actually, I train teachers. I've written a book for parents in which I go from the science of all this, neuroplasticity, the science behind gender stereotypes, and everything around us that shape it, as well as the consequences and what can we do about it. So if parents had this knowledge from the moment that they were born, and they've applied and they understood how embedded, how we are creating those narratives. If parents could see and equip their kids and role model from the absolute very beginning, and teachers had, again, that knowledge and that capacity to correct and contain, then I think it will be a massive, massive change. Three of you are welcome to my book. I'll send a copy to you. Everybody else, you can check it in Amazon, Childhood Unlimited, Parenting Beyond the Gender Bias. And I think whenever you understand it, then you no longer believe that much about that idea of like boys need to know why in order to learn, and women don't. I mean, everybody should care. I mean, there's people want to know why they need to learn something. Their way we raise them is different, and maybe in women, the desire to please others and the desire to do right by certain rules is bigger than the way they've been encouraged to critical think or to to be confronting. So, so again, having an education system that prioritizes the why, it will be beneficial for everyone, not only for boys, for everyone. And it's the idea that we need to teach them very different things instead of the idea of how to create a system in which everyone fits, in which everyone uniqueness it's catered for in a way that because there are not so many limitations or boxes. I mean, I think that's where the magic happens. The magic happens in which we run away from this: boys do this way, women do things this way, girls like this, boys like this. Whenever we see that a lot of these things are constructs, and everybody, and we are putting those ideas and we are making that self-fulfilling our reality, that's when a lot of the magic could and hopefully will happen.
So they need to know, why am I learning this? And who are you anyway with the teacher? In order to care about the what. Girls are a little bit better at doing the work anyway, even if they don't see the why. So technical schools. But the thing that I feel perhaps most strongly about of all is more male teachers. And that should be something that should not be controversial, at least in theory it isn't. So in the 1980s, 33% of our teachers were men.
And that's also because of the feminization of work. There is a phenomenon that happens, which is that when a role is suddenly majority of women are part of, men lose way more interest, and it loses society status, and it also gets worse pay. So let's not forget that teachers were only men before, and then there is like a rapid growth, and it has happened with a lot of works. We'll probably see with doctors very soon as well, and we're starting. Every role that suddenly women become a majority of, it loses status, but the most important part, it gets worse pay. So now, obviously, men don't want to be teachers because it's extremely demanding and it pays really bad, and it's not extremely well recognized. Well, it used to be the job that everybody, it was very well recognized and fairly paid. So I could not agree anymore about the importance of having teachers that are male, especially primary teachers. We need to debunk the idea that men cannot be carers, and we need those kids to grow up with role models. It's very difficult now for boys to see themselves as teachers because in their heads, I mean, my kids at school, all teachers are women. Surprise, surprise, the principal, it's a man. Because that's the other thing that happens in education. Even though the majority of teachers are women, the growth to leadership positions is again much faster and much more evident for men. So men are underrepresented in the whole education, but they are overrepresented at the top, which again, I think in these conversations, very important to be nuanced. So yes, I think it's extremely important that there are more teachers that are male. So pay more. I mean, women teachers will appreciate it, and it will make it more attractive to everybody, and also make teachers be a very celebrated career, because they hold a lot of responsibility.
And now it's 23% and falling. And about a man in teaching, and they said, make sure that his door has a window, which most schools do anyway. But if you're a male teacher, never teach in a classroom where there isn't a window in the door. Did I say that wrong? Window, because there's a trust issue, which is understandable, but it's gone so far now that we've become suspicious of men having a role in the lives of boys. And
whose fault is that? Because still the data shows that there are many more cases of unreported abuse than there are cases of false accusations. So I would agree. Oh, I've told you before, big fan of more men by teacher. But yeah, let's do it with doors, with windows. Let's create environments in which everybody feels safe. I know that men at the moment feel quite unsafe, but so do the rest of society about these current issues. So I say, yeah, let's put measure in place, let's do due diligences, and let's create spaces where those things don't happen. I was sexually abused by one male teacher. And again, the school probably could have done more. I was not the one. There were lots of women. He's in jail now. And would I wish that they had been more measure in place and more careful with the grooming? Well, yes. Would I be suspicious if my kids get very attached and doing things in which there is an imbalance of power in places where they might not have the tools or the safety? Then yes. I went to a Catholic school, and again, a lot of things happened. So, and I'm not the only one. Like this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of people. So let's also not pretend this is not a problem. Let's not pretend it's not a problem that there are men that do go to these institutions and then choose education because there is an accessibility and a power imbalance that might suit their awesomeness. And I'm not saying all men, of course not. I have teachers that are men that are amazing. I will leave my kids with them, absolutely no problem. But I think it's fair, it's safer for everybody, not only for the students and for the parents, but also for the teachers, if there are measures in place that allowed some safety. Everybody feels better when there are due diligences and structures that protect the kids. But yeah, let's also pay them more. Let's also create more status.
As their own sons. And I think credit to Scott here, he's been very outspoken on this, but the decline in the share of men in, like, the Scouts is not Boy Scouts anymore. This might have passed you by, but Boy Scouts of America no longer exists. It is now Scouting for America and co-ed. Big Brothers Big Sisters has much longer waiting times for boys than girls because they don't have male volunteers. The YMCA is now staffed by mostly female volunteers. And so there's this huge absence of men in the lives of boys.
There's a lot of absence of men in the life of children. I don't bring my kids to things that are not co-ed. I would never send my kid to a only men's school. I would never send my daughter to only women's school. I think those narratives are part of the problem. I think we live in a society altogether, and separating children for such an early stage. I'm not talking about teenagers. Whenever further down the line, there might be reason or specific issues, but we should be able to have these conversations. We should be able to have certain spaces and certain social environments in which we all coexist, because that's the reality of society. Because men not being in the life of boys, it's problematic. But it's also problematic that they're not in the life of their daughters. What role models, what is this teaching, what is this telling to the role of men? What is this telling everyone about the presence of male and caring and nurturing and caregiving? This is a global problem. So yeah, we need more men. We need men to volunteer for things and to be part, but we also need men just coaching their daughters' football class. And we need men being able to volunteer in the school and in the PTA and in all those activities. This is not solely a boys' issues. So yes, maybe this is a conversation, again, from childhood that we need to have globally. We need to put them together and let them play together and celebrate their uniqueness and their differences as people, not so much as boys or girls, because it reinforces the idea of them and us, which is what we're trying to move from.
And one way that public policy can address that is through schools. Like, if we can't increase the share of male teachers with all kinds of scholarship programs and incentives and better pay, which would be good for everybody, then I don't know what else we could do. And I'm seeing more people open to that argument. We do not want an all-female teaching profession. And so that's an example where you should be able to get more support.
And Richard, I think it was your study that showed that if you try to reverse engineer to a single point of failure for when a boy kind of comes off the tracks, it's when he loses a male role model. And I'm not sure, Richard, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the data on when, quote unquote, mom and dad get divorced 92% of the time, it ends up being a household headed by a single parent who's the mom. The outcomes are reasonably similar for girls, but they're much worse for boys. And the fascinating summary or conclusion is that while boys are physically stronger, and I'm pretty sure I got this from your study, they're mentally and emotionally much weaker. And just educating, just parents who are going through divorce knowing you really got to keep an eye on the boy. Because as much as we think, okay, they're bigger and they're stronger, they're actually weaker as humans.
If I ever dare to say, as a feminist, men are weaker as humans, I will be hung in the middle of the street. I will be accused of man-hater. And also, I just don't think it's true.
Now that I use Monday service, AI makes solving tickets.
I have a son and I have a daughter, and I am sorry, but my son is no weaker. He's also not stronger. I think what we do is we make those men, we make those boys weaker because, again, we don't give them space and we don't give them the full realm of emotions. So if there's a divorce, but the girl is feeling more confident to talk about the friends in school, if she feels like she can be sad, if she feels that if she has those tools and those and that language, then it's much easier to handle. Women are not allowed anger and men are not allowed sadness. That's what we model for them. That's what we tell them. So whenever your parents divorce, what happens to you, the normal feeling to have is sadness. It's very sad. You miss your dad. The thing that you felt upset, it feels unsafe, it feels scary. And the tools that we give, the language we give to boys is through anger. So I am sure that those kids that don't have a space to put that sadness on end up acting out. And that's what we see a lot of the things that whenever they get off the trails. And it's because the way they're allowed to express their sadness, the way they've been taught, the way they are celebrated, and is through attitudes that are more related with anger. The same way that doesn't serve it doesn't serve women whenever we don't have the capacity to show anger, because anger creates action. Anger, it's a very useful tool. All of the emotions exist because they have a purpose. And by separating them and you're allowed this, but you're not allowed this, we're failing everyone. But yeah, stop not believing in men. Like, why do I find that in this thing, I'm the only one of the four of you that actually love men unconditionally? I see their potential, and there's nothing more loving than saying, I expect better from you. Also, I want better for you. I don't think you're doomed. I don't think you're weaker. I don't think you're a pathetic person that needs to be told all the time what to do because otherwise you just have no... I don't believe any of those things. I think men are babies. I mean, I birthed my son and it's 10 feet, 10 toes and 10 fingers, and it's a work in progress. And then we, society, shape them, and we as a parents and the school and their friends and the algorithm, the media, and we all have a thing to shape that little flesh full of potential. So no, I don't think it's good for men that we have narratives about how they're weaker and how they need all these things. I think it's about how we dismantle the things that are holding them back by naming them, by saying like, yeah, I can understand how we shaped you to be like that, and we don't agree. That's not fair on you. That's not fair on anybody. So yeah, I welcome you if you want to do that experiment. I'll go to my LinkedIn and I'll say men are weaker humans, or I'll go sentences, just literally copy paste it from what you're saying and see what happens when a feminist say it. see what is the global reaction.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, there's this really nice image in psychology where they compare orchids to dandelions. And the idea is that orchids are just a bit more fragile. They do well when you take care of them, but they die quickly if you don't. And dandelions are more resilient, right? They can grow in the cracks in the sidewalk or whatever. And it turns out that boys are a bit more orchid and girls are a bit more dandelion. And so family breakdown, neighborhood poverty, poor schooling, all of those things affect boys much more than girls.
Okay, I'm gonna do an experiment with you. Who is the orchid? White people or black people? Because I can guarantee you the white people are the orchid. Who is the orchid? The middle class person or the person, the working class person? I'm gonna guarantee you it's the middle class person. I feel that this orchid thing, it's privilege. I think we all benefit when we're being taken care of. I think whenever we have a society that look for us and take care of us and see us and give us what we need, we all do better. We're all orchids. But I also think that whenever you put any human in a situation in which they have to survive, we're all survivors. We're all dandelions. I think what is happening at the moment, it's that all of the care and all of the attention is not being directed to men. And it sucks. I mean, it sucks. And I understand it sucks. And I understand it's scary. But again, we are not, like, we are, in Spain we have a say, like, may God not give you everything you're able to endure. And I'm not religious, but may the universe don't. Because women have had to become dandelions, but women also thrive with the care and the love and the right amount of water. Black people have had to be dandelions, but again, let's not pretend this is a compliment, because it's not. So again, how do we create a society in which everybody gets the perfect amount of care, as much as possible care, so we can all thrive, and how we can teach everybody in society that we need to find ways to also survive and be positive civic part of the society within our circumstances. That's what I would be interested, rather than cataloging men in orchids and women in dandelion. I feel like that's lazy. That's a way out.
Boys are much more sensitive than girls are. Scott's exactly right.
That idea that boys are more fragile than girls is one of those counterintuitive ideas that we need to consider if we want to help young men today. In the next episode of Lost Boys, we'll continue the conversation with Richard Reeves and talk about why it's so difficult to even get people to talk about this problem. Can we help boys without hurting girls? The short answer is yes, of course. Why aren't the problems of boys a bigger political issue? Why is it hard for some groups like Democrats to even talk about these problems? And we'll talk about a secret army of women who are demanding we do better by young men. Thanks for joining me and Scott Galloway for this premiere episode of Lost Boys.
And thank you for joining me in this 36th station of this program. And I cannot wait to come for episode 2 and are discussing more. Because again, the magic happens in the yes and in the extra context, in my opinion. Thank you for being here. Bye.